بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد. Continuing in our lessons on the fiqh of food and drink, last week we were talking about the ruling on, or the week before that, the ruling on alcohol. Alcohol and food and drink, and we spoke about alcohol being two types. Ethyl alcohol, or ethyl alcohol, which is the one that intoxicates, it's called ethanol, and the methanol, which is the one that poisons, and this one is used for pesticides and the likes. And we stopped at the point where we mentioned the Qaadir, the rule, which is that alcohol is prohibited due to the iskar, intoxication. So whatever amount of food that contains alcohol or intoxicant, if it's something can intoxicate in large amounts and small amounts is haram. And we mentioned Shaykh Ibn Uthaymeen rahimahullah in one of his fatawa, Biqa' Bab al-Maftuh, volume 17, page 63, he said, do not think a specific percentage of alcohol makes something haram. Rather, any percentage which influences or affects the person, such that if they drank that mixture of alcohol, they'll become intoxicated. Then it becomes haram. As for a small amount of alcohol present in food, which evaporates or does not affect, it's mustahlika, it's been absorbed, then it's permissible. For example, 1%, 2%, 3% doesn't make something haram. And so this point we mentioned because some people, they look at the number. They say if it's this much percentage is okay, if it's not. Rather what we should look at is, does this particular amount intoxicate? That's the qaida. That's the principle. So if you remember that, alcohol is prohibited due to intoxication. So now we're going to continue from there. Alcohol then has two uses. One is for drinking, consumption, and recreation, right? Which we say is haram. Everyone knows. You can't drink alcohol, you can't, or intoxicants. Khamr is intoxicants as well. You can't drink them, you can't eat them, you can't enjoy them or for recreation. Second type is alcohol used for other purposes. So not intoxication, but it's used for preservation of food or as a solvent. That one we're going to separate and we'll talk about after. So two types then. Alcohol for consumption, for eating, drinking, recreation, and the second one for purpose of solvency, to keep something preserved, or it's added to your food to keep the shelf life. So we'll begin with the first one. Alcohol, what people eat and drink and they use for recreation. There's no doubt that it's haram, this one, right? Agreement, the Quran and Sunnah, al-Ijma', alcohol or intoxicants which are used for intoxication are prohibited, and that includes alcohol used for cooking. Right? Because the question came last week, what about cooking with alcohol? It's haram to cook with alcohol, just as it's haram to eat or drink alcohol. Even if you're using a small amount in the food, because alcohol is prohibited, period. Small amount and large amount. Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, what did he say? Whatever can intoxicate in large amount, فَقَلِيلُهُ haram. Small amounts is haram. So people ask the question, we know we can't smoke particular intoxicants or narcotics, we can't drink alcohol, but when cooking, can we add it to our food? And the answer is no for two reasons. Number one, it's not allowed to own the alcohol. Aslan, you can't buy alcohol, let alone use it. It's haram to buy it. Hadith Ibn Umar radiyallahu ta'ala anhuma fi Sahih Sunan Abi Dawud and others, Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam cursed alcohol in 10 categories. And from those, he cursed the alcohol itself, the one who drinks it, the one who serves it, the one who sells it, the one who buys it. So if you can't buy it, cooking wine, you forget about using it. You see, you have to first buy it. Haram to buy it. The thing it's cursed itself. And second thing is, if you can't buy it, then you can't consume it. So for Muslims themselves, we don't cook with alcohol for whatever reason. Because we should not have alcohol in our homes. So from that hadith, Sahih Sunan Abi Dawud, Hadith Ibn Umar, it's prohibited alcohol and the carrier, all of them are cursed. Now, someone may say, okay, that's given. Muslims, we don't cook with it, we don't have it. What if someone else put it in there? I.e. the chef in the restaurant. Or by accident, someone dropped some alcohol in there. So if alcohol is put into the food, or intoxicant is put into the food, whether it be wine or other types of alcohol, or even now with cannabis, it's sold and it's made or used for cooking. If someone else put it, like a disbeliever, or someone put it by accident, and we have to be specific because people say when it comes to cooking out with alcohol, particularly using red wine and white wine, these are the ones people are talking about, or other brands for glazing steaks or white wine and seafood. These are the most common uses. What's the ruling then? If it falls in or somebody else put it, not me, can I eat the food at the end? So the issue here is it has to be clear. What I mentioned a few minutes ago doesn't contradict what I'm going to mention now. In a Mawsu'a al-Fiqhiyya, it mentions the one who cooks with alcohol and then consumes the juice or the liquid is subject to the Hajj punishment. Hajj punishment because this is the essence, Ayn al-Khamar. And this same applies to making dough with alcohol and eating it, as mentioned by the Shafi'i and Hanabila. Volume 25, page 95. So here the ulama mentioned, if somebody puts alcohol, even a small amount, which doesn't intoxicate, it's still haram to eat it. Because alcohol is prohibited to eat, drink, consume, even in small amounts that doesn't intoxicate. Some people, they mix the 2 points. The one I mentioned earlier about intoxication with this point. Just because you have a small amount you use to glaze the steak doesn't mean that you can just taste it. 1 drop of alcohol is haram. It's a very important point because some people say, oh, it's not enough to intoxicate, so it's allowed. It's haram even that much. Because فَقَلِيلُهُ haram. A small amount is haram. Ibn Qudamah, he writes in Kitab al-Mughni, the one who cooks with alcohol and consumes its juices is subject to the Hajj punishment because the essence of alcohol is still there. Volume 9, page 160. So some people, they mix the 2 principles. The one which is that intoxication is what's prohibited with, I put a little bit and I just evaporate it. And we're going to get to that point. It doesn't even evaporate. Or I just put a little bit for flavoring. It's haram to own, haram to taste. Ibn Hazm writes in Muhalla, everything that intoxicates in a person in large amounts, that a drop of it is haram. To whatever other degree someone can consume. It's prohibited to drink, to own, and use. Al-Muhalla, volume 7, page 478. Very clear, drop. So for us as Muslims, we don't do it. If somebody else did it, like the chef at the restaurant, as long as it's still present, the alcohol there, its scent, taste, and color, فَهُوَ haram. You can't consume it. Because some people will say, but what about the thing you mentioned the week before? Before that, you mentioned about small amounts of alcohol absorbed. This one is not absorbed. It's still there. And that's why when you see people when they cook with alcohol, and I'm going to get to the numbers in a minute, it doesn't absorb. It's there in its essence, in its form. It's actually right in front of you. And so some people, they mix this up, and so they say, I'm not going to use it. When I go to the restaurant, the chef will put it and I'll eat it. And what they don't realize is that you're actually eating the alcohol. It's equivalent to taking a small shot and just drinking it. No difference. Because what they put in, as you will see, it still remains in the most degree. So just remember, alcohol is prohibited, a drop of it, to a large amount. It's prohibited to drink it in the consumption to intoxicate. All of it is prohibited. The Rasul said, if a large amount of anything causes intoxication, and a small amount is prohibited. Now with that being said, somebody will say then, what if there is some food, like the food that we have today, which on our shelves in the stores, which has small trace amounts of alcohol? These ones are different because the principle istihlak is the color, taste, and scent have to be absorbed, even though it might be there. So for example, ethanol is used to preserve all the food in our stores. That amount is so small and it's not going to have any traces. So the scholars exempted that. Versus the one which you have cooking wine, used for steak or used for seafood, which is white wine. That one, the taste is there. That's why they put it in the first place. Some people, they want to assume they put it in just so they can evaporate it. It costs hundreds of dollars, this bottle. It's not just for putting in. So some people, they mix the two. That which if we go with istihlak, taste has to be gone, the color and the scent. So when we talk about ethanol used for preservation, and we're going to get to that too more, that's very, very small. Versus the teaspoon or cup that you put into the cooking, that one, the alcohol is not burnt away, evaporated. Like in lo faradna, let's take it. If you say, okay, what if I evaporated it? Like example, I go and I take a soup and I put alcohol and I boil it for hours. All of it is gone. Is it halal now? What do you think? If I have a soup, I put alcohol and I left it for hours this time. And it all goes away. Taste, color, and scent. Is it halal? Who wants to take a shot at that? No? Yes. If it's all gone. Absolutely, all of it gone.
You added it yourself?
Yeah, I'm sinful for adding, yes. But I cooked it all away. If I cook it all out, he's right. It's halal now. But that's, like you said, who does that when they cook? No one does this. Anyone knows. You don't buy an expensive bottle to cook it away. But if we were to assume this, then it is halal because that's istihlak. Versus what happens in a restaurant is not istihlak. They put a little bit, they cook it for 15 minutes, and they give it to you. And so here, Ibn Taymiyyah mentions, back again, the principle of istihlak. If alcohol falls into water and it's completely absorbed in it, then someone drinks it, is not regarding as drinking alcohol, and the had doesn't apply to the person. Because nothing of its taste, color, and odor or scent remains. Mustadrak ala Majmu' Fatawa, volume 3, page 12. This is important. It has to go all the way. So some people, again, they're mixing the two. Istihlak would be like when you buy your milk or your canned goods, there's a little bit of alcohol put in there to keep it in the store, or the shelf life. That's okay, because it doesn't have any taste, color, or scent. Versus when you go to the restaurant, he puts the wine into the food, this is very different. And this point, if you understand it correctly then, let's get to the point that people have, which is that I'm not going to put it. When I go to the restaurant, the chef will put it. And so if I go, he'll put it, he'll glaze it, or he'll flambe it, whatever they call it, they put the fire, and then I'll just eat it. This point has to be mentioned because some of the awam, they hold the view that it's cooked out. The first thing we should know, when you put alcohol, red wine in steak or white wine in seafood, it does not disappear. It does not disappear. And that's why our ulama, our contemporary scholars, whenever they ask a question, specifically cooking with alcohol and it evaporates, they ask this question, all of them said it's not allowed. For example, you can find on YouTube or on audio, Sheikh Salih Fawzan, his fatwa, Sheikh Salih Suhaimi, his fatwa, and Sheikh Sulaymaan Ruhayd, his fatwa. All of them mention, as long as that a drop is still there, it's haram. And that's important to remember. When we say evaporate, we mean the whole thing disappears. And we don't know any restaurant that does that. Now, someone wants to say, brother, there's a possibility. It's a possibility, right? Now, here we'll look at what the specialists, they say. The United States Department of Agriculture, they did a study in 2017. They looked at how much alcohol burns away after the time of cooking. It's important. These are numbers you can find online. They found that if someone puts alcohol in food and cooks it, just boiling it and on the heat quickly and removes it, 85% of the alcohol is still there. If you flambe it, the one where you put, the fire, big fire comes when you put the alcohol. They do with seafood and 75% of alcohol. If you just keep it there overnight, 75%. If you bake it 25 minutes or more, 45% is still there. So they did the numbers. Only if you cook it for 3 hours, you have zero. And no one cooks any pasta for 3 hours. We know this. It doesn't work. So 3 hours you have to cook. And they say about there, 5% or less is still there. So if someone wants to say that one drop, it's impossible. Because if you're going to wait at the restaurant for 3 hours for your food, you wouldn't be there. For the point I'm trying to mention here, a lot of people, they mention this point because they want to. They make easy what is serious. Alhamdulillah, the alternatives. First of all, when you go to the restaurant, you can ask, I don't want alcohol if there's alcohol in the dish. Alhamdulillah, you just ask them. If there's alcohol there, and it's very important, if you go to a restaurant, you don't know, you ask them what's inside the food. If they tell you this and this and this, you say, please take that out. Second, if you're cooking yourself at home, there is alcohol-free cooking wine available. It's de-alcoholized, means it's 0% or close to it. And our fuqaha, they mention this is actually halal. Now some people will say, how good is that compared to the high brand? It's not the same, but still, if you want whatever it's supposed to do, the taste, it's still there but without alcohol. It's actually available. And it's surprising when you think about this, that today everything's available. If you actually need it for your food, it's there. Like, why is that one halal? Is de-alcoholized means it's 0% or close to it. And that's just Da'im and other ulama, they say if it's actually 0% or close, it is permissible to use. So if you're a chef at home and you want that, you can actually find it. But at the restaurants, ask and remove it. Alhamdulillah, this is there. Because some people, again, like I said, when they go, especially those traveling in foreign lands, they take it easy. They say, oh, it goes away in the cooking. And they're forgetting that the Chardonnay, or whatever they call it, it's hundreds of dollars. It's not going to be burnt away. They put it for the taste. We have to be careful and we have to be serious about our deen. Because alcohol, we said before, it's very serious. Last point, some fuqaha, they take a step further. They say that forget about if it burns or not. It's najis. Some of them, they hold the view. Actually, Jumhur, you may argue, Wallahu alam, they say that even the qawl rajih, Wallahu alam, is not, but they say it's najis. So some Shaykh, I believe Shaykh Sa'af Fawzan says najis. Forget about putting it. If it's in there, it's done. The food is haram because it's najasa. Although other scholars, they argue the correct view is not najis, but still haram. So inshallah, it becomes clear. Cooking wine or cooking with alcohol is haram in Islam for you, and you cannot consume it unless we assume that absolutely it disappears altogether, which is 3 hours or likes, and that's not most likely happening. And even then, the remnants may still be there, and there's no need to put yourself in that doubt. Inshallah ta'ala, it's better to avoid altogether. The second reason now alcohol is used in our food, we said preservation. And this is what ethanol usually is used for. Ethanol is used as a preservative. And the preservative means it's used to keep the shelf life of the food going, or to keep it in your stock or in your home without expiring. So if this amount is used, which is very small, and it's again absorbed, the scholars say it's permissible. And so we can come from two sides. Number one, the principle is istihlak. And number two, who can think of another qaida we mentioned that can help us here? Istihala possibly, but think about it. Every single product you can think of has some kind of ethanol in there. Everything you can imagine, from milk to bread. Yes, what's this principle? Everything, it's if it, Good. عامة بلوى وعموم بلوى. So the ulama mentioned, because we said now every single product you could think of, milk even, has some trace amounts of alcohol for preservation. So from that angle, the ulama, they understood that this is unavoidable. Shaykh Sa'ad Kathran, for example, he mentions, when he talked about this issue, he said the amount of alcohol found in food, drinks, and medicine, like this small amount, there's no harm in it, alhamdulillah. From those who took this view as well, Shaykh Ibn Uthaymeen, he says, rahimahullah, that this amount of alcohol is absorbed and does not harm. And then he mentioned the Shaykh that the reality is that in the food is a small amount of alcohol, like alcohol found in medicines, juice, and milk. And this amount is pardoned because the person, if he drank a lot of it or ate a lot of it, it wouldn't become intoxicated, so it's pardoned. Because we can't avoid it. Anything you can imagine has small amounts for preservation, tahaffud, just to keep it around. So we're not going to say to people it's haram, because then we're going to be telling them don't eat. It's equivalent to saying don't eat anything. So alhamdulillah, that's pardoned. Now, so that's preservation. The last use of alcohol in food and drink is as a solvent, a carrier. A solvent means something which carries something else. Right? So something that is, you use it to dissolve something else in it, or not dissolve, to preserve it, and to carry it so it can be preserved in its original form. For those of you in chemistry, you know what a solvent is. Usually, alcohol is the most popular solvent because it's versatile, it's cheap, and it can be used for everything. And so what is an example of alcohol used as a solvent? An example is vanilla extract. You have vanilla extract, you take the vanilla pod, you put it inside this alcohol, and you preserve it. When you want to use the vanilla for baking, it's pure vanilla. And the alcohol is just there to preserve it, to keep it fresh and able to be kept around. This issue now, the ulama, they discuss it then. So if you want to know what's the ruling of vanilla extract, you have to first know what's the ruling on using ethanol as a solvent. So let's look at what some of the different groups of people have said. Some groups of speakers or researchers, they say it's halal to use ethanol as a solvent, period. Because you're not using it to drink it, it's using to carry something else. But that doesn't seem very daqiq, because what if you have 50% alcohol or 70% alcohol? And you're just telling yourself, I want to buy that and keep it at home. Still, that's equivalent to more than alcohol found in wine. So we'll give the example of the HMA, this group we mentioned before, the Halal Monitoring Association, the biggest halal body, or halal monitoring authority, the biggest group in our country here, Canada, that is dealing with halal meat and halal food. They say, and they posted on their website and Instagram as well. It says here, vanilla extract, vanilla beans are put in a solvent. Halal if the solvent is vegetable glycerin or animal glycerin from zabiha animal or non-grape or date ethanol. Haram otherwise. It means if it's other than that. So what did they do here? They showed us that vanilla has different ways you can preserve it. One is by alcohol. One is the glycerin, which is a type of oil extracted from vegetables and animals. And thirdly, they didn't mention if it's water. You can actually preserve it in water. Maybe not the best, but still. So they actually hold the view, and you have to pay attention because I said before, a lot of people don't know this. HMA, they follow the Hanafi madhab. And if you didn't know that, you'll see from this mawqif. They say if it's non-grape or date ethanol, it's halal to use as solvent. Why grape and date? Why not any other ethanol? Because the Ahnaf, the Hanafi madhab, they hold the view, two views in the madhab, but one of the views that they use a lot, Abu Hanifa's view and Abu Yusuf, alcohol is only what's produced by dates and grape. You see, some of us we don't know. We have to know where we're coming from. Otherwise, you might take a view that you don't agree with. Dates and grape. Everything else, honey or barley or فهو halal. If used for other than drinking, they say. If not, so they say that if it's other than alcohol, grape or date, if you're using it for something other than drinking, it's okay. That's the Hanafi position. All other madahib don't agree with them in this. They say no. Alcohol is anything that brings khamar, khamar aql, period. Wherever the source may be. Therefore, you can't use it to drink, you can't use it for other reasons. Pay attention, this is very important because I believe sometimes this stuff is kept like in the fine print. No one knows. And so when you read it, you say, subhanAllah, I didn't know that. So their view then is based on this. And if you go to different mawsu'at, you see that the view of the Hanafis is the view of Abu Yusuf and Abu Hanifa. But Muhammad bin Hassan Shaybani, the third of their imam of their madhab, he says no, haram, period, categorically. And that's the fatwa that they actually should be using. Because we're not trying to get into the madhab issues of the Hanaf. But if you want to check their own madhab, it says here, Ibn Abidin says, وَهُوَ مُفْتِ بِهِ عِنْدَ حَنَفِيَّة. The real fatwa is the one of Muhammad Hassan Shaybani. Even for other uses, it's haram. Now, just to make it clear, there's an HMA article they posted, a research about ethanol use, and they very clearly state this. Alright, so just take the excerpt from their website. There's a link. It says, as they say here, as for non-khamar alcohol, there are two opinions, etc. And then they come to the conclusion, as for those products which have alcohol listed as active ingredients, such as vanilla essence, if it's used in a minimal non-intoxicating amount, as vanilla essence is normally used, it cannot be considered haram. Especially in the purpose of using such product is not for alcohol. That's on their website. So do we agree with that or not? That's the question we have to ask. Because if you're Hanafi and you take this view, it wouldn't be a problem buying regular vanilla extract. You will have no problem. Because they're going to argue the mainstream use alcohol source is non-date, non-grape. I mean, when the last time you find date or grape alcohol in Canada, right? That's not the origin of the date. We use wheat. So all of it is fine for them because you're using it as a carrier. Now, with this being said, what do our mashayikh or the ulama say? Other mashayikh versus the ahnaf, what do they say about this? Because at the end of the day, this is the debate where it's coming. So inshallah, we say there's three issues to look at, and then there's the fatwa of one of our scholars. So, and alhamdulillah, there's alternative. Just in case you're thinking there's no alternative, there's alternative. Alhamdulillah. Number one, does it matter the source of ethanol or not? Does it matter if it's date or grape or wheat? Ethanol is ethanol. It gets you intoxicated, فهو حرام. Majma' Fiqh Duwali, the International Islamic Fiqh Academy, they asked this question, right? And this is issue, resolution number 225. Question 16, does the source of ethanol, artificial, natural, have a different sharia ruling? The answer, the source of ethanol does not have any different sharia ruling. So Majma' Fiqh Duwali said, it doesn't matter the origin. Ethanol intoxicates, haram. So the differentiation is only with the ahnaf. It's making sense here? So when we check out ethanol, we shouldn't ask, where did it come from? No, it's ethanol, haram. We know this intoxicates. So that's the first thing. Because again, it's a fiqh issue. All other madahib and even the more other second opinion of the Hanaf is with the majority. So firstly, if it's ethanol, intoxicates, haram. That's what you should remember. No need to ask about the source. But the second point, let's assume now I go and buy the vanilla extract. And you go to the store, you get this small bottle, it has vanilla, alcohol and other things. If I'm using ethanol as a solvent, it's permissible to use ethanol as a solvent if the amount of ethanol is very small. But if it's a large amount that can get you intoxicated, that's haram too. So you're allowed to use ethanol as a solvent as long as it's very small amount. If the ethanol is a lot that gets you drunk, it's just like any other ethanol. Because where did the differentiation come? The ethanol for solvency is different than ethanol for drinking. This is the question we should ask. Sadly, some of the speakers are just making general statements. They said all ethanol for solvents is allowed. Now, someone will say, but how much ethanol is inside vanilla extract? Who wants to guess how much is there? Yeah?
It's the main ingredient. It has
Yeah. How much percentage do you think? 50%. Well, that's actually very high. Yeah. But you're right. You can get up to there. 35 minimum. That proof is that's that proof. They said that standard, that amount is equivalent to any beer or wine you can find. It's actually much higher. It's actually much higher than some of them people would drink. 35% minimum. FDA says it cannot be called vanilla extract except 35% or more. You can't even call it. Below that, it's called something else, artificial or some other name. So why is this important? 35% is equivalent to mainstream alcohol, like even higher in many ways. And someone may be thinking, can you really get intoxicated by drinking it? Ask the kids. They know better. Wallahi, it's in the news and you can check. The kids, they go to the store and they buy it, they drink it. Billahi alaykum, it's there, you can check. And it's so interesting because the only product that has that much alcohol that's sold in mainstream stores is vanilla extract. No other alcohol with that much amount of alcohol is sold except in LCBOs or those kind of stores. The only one. And that's why in the news they were wondering, why is the government allowing children to literally go and drink it and get high from that? Because they're doing that. It's, of course, it's very dangerous too, because it can also poison you. At 35% is very much. So with that being said, Majma' Fiqh Duwali, again, they say, they ask the question, and it's on their website, you can see it. What's the ruling on using ethyl alcohol as a processor or solvent of raw materials used in manufacturing food products, knowing that a very small ethanol may remain within? They say there's no objection within the Sharia to use the substance of ethyl alcohol or ethanol as a processor or solvent for raw materials used in manufacturing food products, unless there are halal alternatives. That's the first condition. If there's halal alternatives, we have to explore them. And with the amount that does not cause drunkenness. Now the problem is that if we would say that the solvent is small, if we said that the ethanol is small, then we can agree with you. 35% is very high. You can actually get intoxicated. This is what's happening. So for those reasons, ethanol as a solvent is only permissible if it's very small amount, and if it was a bigger amount, we have to argue that there's no alternative and it's necessary. But that's not the case with vanilla extract because there is alternative, as we'll mention in a second. So inshallah, it becomes clear here, because what people are doing, they're saying is that if 35% was, for example, in wine or beer, haram. But if it was in the solvent, for example, vanilla, it's okay, because you're going to use a little bit. It's still the same. It's equivalent. Because no one drinks this one, but they drink that one, doesn't mean that it still can be drunk. So this is important, as you can find this on the website of the International Fiqh Academy in English too, actually. Alhamdulillah, they actually put all the material in English, they translated themselves, so you can read it. And there are other good questions there for those who want to see some of the answers of the Majma'. Bottom line, some of our scholars do to this say, stay away from all of it. Especially if it has alcohol, because of this problem. And I believe there's a question, our teacher Abu Fajr, he asked Sheikh Muhammad Hisham Tahiri, and he mentioned if there's alcohol in it, it's haram. Online, you see that question, because the understood point is that the alcohol is still there. And it's not a small amount. Last point, vanilla extract should be avoided due to this, even if you argue that there's like we said, the Ahnaf and others have a view, stay away from it, it's better, because there's an alternative. And the alternative is alcohol-free vanilla extract, and it's put in water. You can find it, I bought it myself, you can find it in stores. It says vanilla extract in water. It's still expensive, it's the same thing, you can try it, tastes the same, it's in water. Alhamdulillah, water. Nothing else. I'm not talking about the cheap one too, like they're different, this is what's called the artificial one. No, this is equivalent. The only difference is, this one's in water, and that one's in alcohol. Because some will say, but I don't want to use a lower grade one. It's not lower grade, it's the same thing. Just that Because the price is the same at least, right? And the point is, it's available. So alhamdulillah, that's a solution, because some people, they want to use it in their cooking and their baking, and then this mushkila comes to them. طيب, inshallah, we'll just take two more points that people asked about, and it's connected to this, and that's the issue of, so now the alcohol, so this is the issue of alcohol. We'll move to another one which is connected to it, which is mouthwash. Mouthwash with alcohol. So even though it's not food and drink, it's connected, and someone asked last week about that. What's the hukm on that? So we know the mouthwash, they have alcohol, ethyl alcohol, and it's in quite a big amount. Quite a big amount, if you can Google it and see. And so the scholars, they mention, at least I found two different views. One view is that it is permissible to use it, these mouthwashes with a large amount of alcohol, or a sizable amount of alcohol, because it's being used for purifying the mouth, not consumption. This is what I believe Majma' Fiqh Duwali did. This is their view, the International Islamic Council. Alleged to Da'ima, the permanent committee in Saudi Arabia, we translated some time ago, their fatwa was, after the committee studied the issue, they answered that it is not allowed to use medicine mixed with intoxicants to rinse and clean the mouth and teeth, or for disinfection due to the presence of permissible available substitutes which can take its place and are free from alcohol. So they held the view, the lajna, that since there are substitutes, it's better to avoid it. Because how much alcohol is inside the mouthwash? It's quite a bit. Can you get drunk from it? Yes and no, because they also put some other chemicals. I believe methanol is in there too. They can poison you or give you like serious ingestion. That's why when you use it, you're supposed to spit it out without swallowing anything. So due to these two views, you can see it's like the same issue here. It's still a lot of alcohol, but you're using it for cleaning your mouth. Is there alcohol-free mouthwash? Yes. Listerine too, the brand names. So just in case people have doubts all the time, I don't want to use something that doesn't work. It works. Same company, no alcohol. So alhamdulillah, better to avoid it. Because someone will say, but what about the same argument with the cough syrup that came up a few weeks ago? Someone asked the same question about cough syrup. So the ulama, they mentioned high amounts of alcohol in cough syrup makes it haram. But because now there's a necessary need to use it, and there's not much alternatives, not always, but there are sometimes. The scholars then, some of them said they held back and said we need to investigate it more. Some say that this is questionable, some say permissible. And why? Because they said that even though it's a high amount of alcohol, just like a solvent, it has a high amount, because the same thing is a solvent. Or a cough syrup, same thing, is a solvent. That's how much they use a lot. They said that when you're sick, the doctor who's trustworthy told you take 3 teaspoons or 2 teaspoons a day, and there's not much alternatives. Like I said, the alcohol is cheap as a solvent. So some of the scholars said there's an alternative, go to it. Sometimes you can. For example, regular cough syrup, there's alcohol-free. There is. Alhamdulillah, that's the best. But if you got a doctor prescription, and that Majma' Fiqh said this, Islami, if you doctor recommended, trustworthy doctor, Muslim, trustworthy doctor, or any trustworthy doctor, if you don't have a Muslim trustworthy doctor, told you have to use this medicine for your sickness, this cough syrup, and it only can be available in alcohol, you use it as prescribed, and that's it. But if you're going to go over the counter and buy one of them and you can find alcohol-free, this is the best, right? Safer. And actually there is, I have to double check, but there is brand name alcohol-free, right? Cough syrup. So that's, alhamdulillah, makes it easy. But when it's prescription, you don't want the doctor is telling you need this, you should not second guess them because they're trustworthy and we have to take their recommendation. One more issue that someone asked before last week was about the issue of marijuana as an intoxicant. And what did the ulama say about that? All right, so we know this issue, I think it came up before, or there's some translation we have on the website about this. When it comes to marijuana, no doubt it is an intoxicant. فَهُوَ خَمَرٌ. And the ulama have agreed to that to the extent that Shaykh Islam ibn Taymiyyah said, whoever makes istihlal of it, this is kufr. Whoever says it's halal. And what I mean by that is not for medical use, because there's some discussion there. I'm talking about istihlal, just using it. So what's important here is that all the scholars, since the first time marijuana appeared in the Muslim world, and just for your own information, cannabis comes from the Muslim world. Not us ourselves, but it became popular before it moved west. That's why we have records of marijuana existing. Ibn Taymiyyah says, rahimahullah, the first records of cannabis only came to the Ummah at the end of the 6th century, beginning of 7th century, because the Tatar, they brought it. They're the ones who proliferated its use. So imagine 6th century Hijri and 7th. Non-Muslim, I don't think they know anything about that at that time. If you Google it, we're actually way ahead of them. And also our prohibitions are way ahead. The warnings came early. So the scholars, they mentioned haram, marijuana, hashish, right, cannabis, haram to use, haram to carry, consume, and then they have different fatwa that came out of it. So there's no doubt on the tahrim of its use for recreation. Some people now are saying, but if you're using it for health benefits, that means medical you're talking about. Medical, there's slight difference, so we'll get to it in a minute. But the one where just using it like people smoking nowadays, it's haram. There's nobody who said otherwise. And some ulama were so severe, like Shaykh Islam ibn Taymiyyah, Imam Dhahabi, that they were so severe because in their time people were using it and very bad things were happening. Ummah was a lot of problems. And people coming to salah like this, intoxicated. Some of the fuqaha said it's a khamr for huwa najas. So even if you come to salah with it, your salah is batil. Just batil, just by having it in your pocket. You can say the war on drugs, Islam, we're the first on the fight against war. We're way ahead. And what's the dalil now? Because some ulama, when they mentioned this, some people said, well, there's no Quran hadith about marijuana. These people, they want to be, argumentative. They say there's no hadith. What are you talking about this? Where's the proof? And we say the hadith we always cite. Rasulullah ﷺ said, whatever intoxicating large amounts, small amounts, haram. So khamr is khamr. And some of the ulama mentioned specific riwayah, the riwayah narrated Salama, they use this as proof. نهى رسول صلى الله عليه وسلم كل مسكر ومفتر. Riwayat Abu Dawud, there's some khilaf on its authenticity. But the wording is that the Rasul ﷺ prohibited everything that causes intoxication or tiredness and fatigue. Mufattir is that which brings you down. Whereas intoxicant brings you high, right? That intoxicates. Because some people say marijuana doesn't have the same effects, it mellows you. Mufattir, they said. And if you go to Sharh of the Hadith, Taqiyuddin Subki, Imam Iraqi, Aun al-Ma'bud, Sahib Aun al-Ma'bud, all of them, and underneath the Sharh of this Hadith, they actually mention hashish as an example of that. And guys, how many years ago that is? That's like generations ago. So some people who try to, I don't know what it is, maybe they want to use it or somebody told them it's beneficial, they try to come with these kind of weak arguments. Taqi Subki, he said, rahimahullah, there's 120 reasons or 120 harms in the dunya and akhirah for using marijuana. 120. Then he lists all of them, one by one. For example, one of those he mentions, it brings bad ideas to your mind. Right? Anybody knows, if you Google this is one of the biggest problems. Some afkar come to your head, a'udhu billah. Wallahi, when you read about it, it's like as if the ulama, they were talking about it in their own time period. They're seeing the people who are addicts and they're writing. So I'm saying this because I believe some people have under impression that it has the health benefits. Now, the second thing, what about medical use? We mentioned already, I think on the website, there's a long post about the ulama's views on medical use of marijuana. There is some khilaf because some ulama said it's permissible for necessary use if there's no other alternative. Taking the asl, which is the mas'ala of using alcohol for medical use if there's no alternative, or the alcohol is derived for some benefit. Some of the scholars, they argue for this, particularly hashish, cannabis, and I think we mentioned that in the website, you can read there. But the final conclusion, many of them, is to avoid it. Avoid it because there are all alternatives, and very rarely do you need medical marijuana for a cure. Because it's not actually a cure, there's debate, it's more calming certain side effects and symptoms, more than curing anything. But the point is, some scholars did mention that, you have to be honest, but the more correct view is that many of them say not allowed, still, because it's not a necessary issue. Now coming down to the derivatives, then some say, okay, what about hashish and its derivatives? For example, hemp seed oil or cannabis-infused hair oil. And so the ulama also had debate on that. Again, it's on the website, you can see the article, where the ulama, they mention about zaytul hashish, cannabis oil. Some scholars say it's permissible, others say not, because if it's haram to use it or to own it, deriving something from it is also haram. Some even argue najas still. That's true. Some of our scholars did say halal because you're using it for external use, but many of them said there's no need to even go there. Finally, the other one, which is the hemp seed oil, and those ones should have THC traces or CBD. This is under discussion. Wallahu a'lam, there's many views. I believe Abu Fajr himself was investigating and more others. So this one needs to be investigated because the ulama, when they speak about hemp seed, sometimes they're talking about actual hemp, which is hashish. Sometimes they're not talking about its equivalent, or it's the sister trees or whatever they call herbs that are equivalent, or sometimes there's THC traces, but not enough to intoxicate. These are issues that need to be investigated more. But in terms of its use for medical purposes, some of the scholars permitted it with the condition that the medical doctor is the one who's advising it and who's actually allowing, and it's not obviously used for any other use. But other scholars say no, you still look for alternatives. So even though that's there, it doesn't give a blanket to anybody to just go and say, I'm going to get a license for medical use, or I'm going to just use it for medical use. You're not a doctor, and you're not allowed to self-diagnose yourself. That's the first thing. Some people miss the whole mawdu'. It's not for you to decide that. And last thing is that why would someone go where there's serious contention? That which is halal is clear and bayyin. Why would you go from there to there? So I'm saying this because, again, there's some people amongst us, not us as Muslims here, but amongst our community, right, as Muslims that we're talking about, that maybe think that it's, it's got a, maybe marijuana has a bad reputation, it's not so bad, and they're not really looking at the fact that so many studies are coming out talking about how bad it is, and how dangerous it is, and all of its effects. So using it for other uses like cooking and eating, obviously that's haram as well, and someone should avoid it altogether. طيب, inshallah. Next week we'll talk about vinegars, right, because it's the next topic, vinegars, and we'll get into some other issues related to non-meat related issues. Inshallah, anyone has any question, we'll take them.
It's not food and drink, but it's still related to the alcohol content. What about perfume and cologne? Just mentioned a lot.
That's a very good question. Perfume and cologne that has intoxicants. It's a long, lengthy discussion. The scholars, they differ there too, because some of them they differ. There is ethanol there or alcohol, but can it intoxicate? Because there are other things that are put into it to ensure that it poisons you or before it intoxicates you at all. So some of them argue that it's haram because it's khamr. Some say it's not khamr. It's chemically changed. It doesn't intoxicate. It kills. So from there, some scholars say permissible, others say not permissible. Some say doubtful, avoid. Maybe next week then we could just mention in more detail because there is a debate there, right? Obviously, avoiding it is better, but then the other problem is that if it doesn't meet the criteria, then some say it's a misunderstanding of the term khamr because it is a khamr, but not the one that we're used to. Right? So maybe we'll get into that inshallah next week. Yes.
So, if how every single person they have a different sensitivity towards alcohol. So sometimes some people can get drunk off of like higher percentages, or some don't. So how do we know like this number 2%, 3% isn't enough to intoxicate someone? Like, couldn't it be enough to intoxicate someone who's highly sensitive to alcohol, for example?
Mm-hmm. So that's the thing. When it comes to intoxication, it's right. Why do we say 2%, 3%, 5%? At the end of the day, ulama say if it has the potential and capacity to do so, i.e. normally, if it's any normal person, because you're right, like if we're using somebody who's like a child, that's not the standard. Because a child can be poisoned or intoxicated with many things. What they mean by this is that the person, average person who consumes will be intoxicated after a large amount of it, whatever it may be, for who haram. So you're right, because some people have a high tolerance and lower, but the hukum is always for the ghalib. We don't say it's halal for the person with high tolerance, haram for low tolerance. You wouldn't even know unless you tried it to begin with. And then you would find out you're not the one who can even tolerate it. You probably, maybe something else happens to you. So the ulama use generally the capacity of intoxication. And that's why the studies are always done to see. And they use these measures also to show that, even the Western world, they have these numbers to show that this is what typically intoxicates people. This amount and this amount. So why they do this? Because again, to make sure that if there is alcohol in medicine, for example, can it be over the counter? Doesn't need prescription? Can the kids use it like this? But we're saying the general possibility of a capacity to intoxicate, that's what is haram. Not for based on your tolerance. Because once that ruling has been made by experts and the ulama ruled, then it's haram. You can't use it. Now,
ethanol as well as other industrial alcohols, sometimes they're intended specifically for industrial purposes like adhesives or painters and stuff like that. If you're transporting them, let's say in the trucking industry, and you know that it's only going for non-consumable purposes, is there any haraj in that?
So that's a good question. So now alcohol that's used for adhesives or other paints, whatever it may be, and it's not used for consumption. These are alcohols, the scholars for the most part, the current scholars, when they examine it, they exempt these from the alcohols are prohibited because number one, even though that it's possible intoxication, usually these are more poisonous, number one. And number two, it's kind of like the hand sanitizer. And the ulama, for the most part, they say it's permissible to use hand sanitizers, even though they have ethanol, because they have other chemicals, but also it's not used for consumption, for outer use. And there is some khilaf, but they seem to say more correct is that prohibition of alcohol is in consumption, not, for example, cleaning wounds or using it for paint. And these are not usually even graded for eating. Transporting the zakat, because zakat, now we're not going to give them the hukum of khamr. And so, yeah, they remove them from the conversation, yeah. Oh, yeah, yes.
This is regarding the solvents. You said that there's a small amount that it's okay. So how do you combine this
So good. So when they say the small amounts is allowed for solvency, it's like that one which is mustahraka. Its amount is there to be used. But you're right. You will never have a small amount as a solvent, because as a solvent you need large amounts to keep the thing going. So the argument then is that if we were to assume you're going to use a solvent, khamr as a solvent, and there's no alternative first of all, and we need to use it, and that amount is underneath intoxication, then now they say it's permissible because it's just going to carry the good. And you can't intoxicate it. But you're right, at the end of the day, because you're now looking at it as a necessity. But alhamdulillah, you might notice that most of the time, alcohol is not needed for insolvency, for food and drink. It's not a must. It's done for cheapness and also popularity. So the bottom line then is that if alcohol is used in insolvency, so a very small amount, for this purpose, like preservation, it goes into that category versus the first category. So we say alcohol used for preservation, and solvency, for that use in very small amounts is excusable. But you're right, how much is small amount? I don't. They didn't even mention how much that is. Yeah.
I remember, I think it was a couple weeks ago, the part of the Qaadir and the Jasad, but that doesn't apply at all to, does that apply to Khamr?
So Khamr is a good point. So we mentioned the Qaadir, small amounts of najasat and ma'fuun, they're for pardoned. Which means that if we're now looking at alcohol, the khilaf is already there. Is alcohol najas in the first place? That's the first khilaf they had. And the second thing after that is that if it is, some scholars said it can never be purified. It's intoxicated. It's najas, just like anything else. While other groups say it's not najas to begin with. This is a more correct view. And there's many proofs they use to show that. So from that angle, you could argue that they say that, like the brother mentioned about cologne. The first argument, they say that cologne and alcohol and cologne is not najas. So spraying it doesn't affect your salah and other things. That's the first conversation. But the one that debated was, can it intoxicate you? Because a group of scholars said najas and haram. So you're right. The majority of scholars hold that view. It's najas, and it's also shouldn't be done. But if you come down to the bottom line, that najas part is not the strongest view, but we come now to the intoxicating. So if we find that alcohol is used for preservation, or as a solvent in very, very small amounts, it's pardoned. Otherwise, like these large amounts, we have to avoid them, inshallah. Yes.
I want to build on Rashid's question, because the most popular basically alcohol that is used is called denatured alcohol, right? And which is basically like alcohol that has like other chemicals that are mixed in it in order to make it unfit for human consumption. So now the question is, would it be permissible to purchase this denatured alcohol on its own in order to be used in order to make things like fragrances mixed with oils and stuff like that?
Well, that's the thing. That's where the issue of the said for that the brother's asking that now in the cologne there is denatured alcohol, and this alcohol is the ethanol mixed with other chemicals in order to make it unfit for consumption. This is what Shaykh Uthaymin argument was, that it's not even drinkable, therefore it's not a khamr that we know. Well, other scholars they say that, and that's where you might argue. Some scholars rely upon some research that said it can, others say no, it kills, and some say, well, if you go to the countries where it's banned alcohol, they drink this, and so it's a very big discussion. But you're right, if it's not alcohol, actual fit for consumption, which is methanol, other things in there, then you could argue that it's not. And so I believe that, wallahu a'lam, that argument is actually worthy. That argument is actually because it's no longer alcohol that we understand, it's methanol. Methanol, the ulama say, does not take the ruling of ethanol. So we said in the beginning, methanol and ethanol, two different things. Ethanol is the alcohol, methanol is poison and pesticide. So, exactly. So if it's methanol, it's not ethanol. The hukum is different altogether. Shaykh Al-Albani amongst those who argue that it's not, once that's clear, it's not. But here's the problem now. Every scholar bases the ruling based on the research that he receives or he took, and he comes to what he sees to be correct. Back in the day, actually, khamr was actually khamr. It was used in the what's it called, your perfumes. Actually, was khamr, like pure ethanol. But now, because of this problem, when they realize people buy it and they spike it with something and they drink it, they started changing the chemicals over time. So next week we'll look at it more, because this is where the debate is, right here, that issue. Another question, yes?
I heard that you're not allowed to give salam to someone who drinks alcohol.
Yeah.
What if they smell it, and they give you salam?
So this one, maybe for Friday's class, we're going to talk about that. Amar ma'ruf nahy anil munkar. If somebody comes to smelling like alcohol or something, can we give them salam? What do we do with them? So Friday's lesson, we're going to talk about. That's a good question. Jazakallah khair. Yes.
Just one quick question again, because you touched on the vanilla extract. So when we're looking at actual vanilla extract for baking purposes, we can read the ingredients and see what it's made in.
Mm-hmm.
But would you say it would be necessary to avoid vanilla flavors? Because if you buy a cup of ice cream or go to the shop, you wouldn't know what's in the vanilla.
That's a good question. So we're talking about the extract itself, not if something was put in to food, then evaporated and just the taste is remaining. That's halal. That's halal. Because now, food that's mixed with alcohol and becomes absorbed, we say trace amounts are gone, or in this case, even the scent is remaining, but the alcohol is gone. That's why they say when you cook with it, buying it is the issue, we said. You can't buy it because 35%. But let's say I did have it. I put 2-3 drops. The whole alcohol, everything's gone. Only the scent remains. And that's what I wanted to begin with. So the ulama, they say therefore that eating foods without vanilla is halal. The problem is me buying it and putting it in. So if you're a baker, you get the halal version and then use it, But if you buy some good vanilla ice cream, for example, and just some ice cream, alhamdulillah, they don't even use the extract, they use the real vanilla. It's very expensive, yeah. Any last question, inshallah? Yes. I'll give the Shaykh Hussein.
Is there any technical decisive term for intoxication or definition for it?
So this is a good point. It's a technical definition of iskar, yani intoxication. So they say that which, the definition of intoxication is that which clouds the mind, they say, i.e. takes away the senses, and somebody now becomes, they lose their ability to make their decisions and to act rationally. Some scholars argue that the definition is not good enough because some of them, they bring you down. But even then, that's not the normal. It's affecting your ability to function normally in terms of your mind and your general senses. Others say, therefore, they say if it's going to intoxicate you, i.e. lift you or lower you, as long as it's clouding your decision making, it's khamr. Others, they said, no, this is mufsid. And actually, some scholars who argue that in the past, marijuana is not even an intoxication, it's more of this angle. It just corrupts you, it ruins you, not intoxication. But the definition the ulama used, what Umar ibn Khattab said, alcohol or toxic is whatever, it clouds the mind, i.e. in the senses, and you can't function normally. Whether it be bring you down or up or whatever, maybe hallucinate or these, because there's different things, right? So altogether, this is the best, because some of the scholars were so detailed there that they started to take things out and say this one is, this one isn't, but they still said it's haram. So Allahu A'lam, yes. Oh, fine. Yeah, his question, yours. Yeah, okay. We'll go for him in a second. Yes, sir.
If it's in small amounts, we said we consider the case that the base is 35%, but we said if it happens to be that it's in small amounts and it's absorbed, is the principle here that we're referring to istihlak?
Exactly, just like istihlak. That's why the preservation use is that level. Just take a little bit to keep the shelf life. So if we were to imagine that you have vanilla and you put a little bit of alcohol just to keep it there, it's just like a preservative. The ulama allow that because it just gets absorbed and the thing doesn't get impacted by it. But obviously that's not what a solvent usually is done. It's like a large amount, like imagine a big, and then they put the things inside. So the problem then is like if you find alcohol as a solvent, we'll have to check how much is in there. 35 is vanilla extract. Others could be lower, wallahu a'lam, but you can see like the alcohol is cheap, so they just use it. So always try to find alternatives if you can, it's safer. Yes, brother.
I was going to ask about like the things that affect your body, but they don't affect your mind. Like, for example, painkillers and stuff like that.
Yeah, this is a good question. Painkillers or other things. So the ulama, now these ones, especially morphine and these things. So the idea is that some of them, they argue these are not like intoxication senses, that there's like, these are like, what's the word for it? Anesthetics and these kind of things. So they're supposed to numb the pain. And so these things are dangerous too, we know, for the body because they're addictive. So scholars suddenly permitted in necessary use. For example, morphine for women who are pregnant, when they go to the delivery room, they need to take an injection to help with the pain. Benj, I think they call these. And these are like just to relieve the pain. And you're not supposed to take it otherwise. Because like I said, it's going to harm you and it's addictive. That case, some of the fatwa, the legend Daim, others say it's permissible in that specific realm. You go to the doctor, you have surgery, they give you painkillers. There's no other use before this except for that, you use it. But for you just to buy it and to use it, that's not allowed. Not darar wa dirar, and some of them are very addictive, as we know in our society. Allah musta'an. Yes.
What about stuff that does not have intoxicants, but they like sport drinks and stuff like that makes you hyper and stuff?
Okay, good question. How about energy drinks like the Monster and the Red Bull and this and this? So generally speaking, some of the scholars, they don't promote this. Even though it doesn't intoxicate you, it's harmful for the body. Because obviously, if you drank a little bit, or someone it doesn't harm them, we could argue. If there's no harm to you yourself, it's halal to drink it because it's on the market. It's not a haram thing, but they don't advise it because there is harm. And we know a lot of young people, they drink it and they raise their heart pressure, and then it's harmful in that sense. So la darar wa dirar, to avoid it is best. But can you say it's haram? No, because it comes back to the harm. It is a harm to you. And so if you're a person drinking beyond the recommended amounts, if you're drinking this to begin with, that's not allowed. And if you're someone who has a underlying health condition, you're not supposed to be taking this, you're not allowed to take it. And that's equivalent to other issues too, whether it be caffeine or soda, whatever. If you have a health condition that says you shouldn't take it, or it's going to harm you, it's not allowed for you. We'll get to that point later about what's the line, because some will say, I don't get it why this. Some people they say, I don't get why poison's haram and then soda is halal, because this one harms you. This is a principle, so maybe we'll get to that. But I think inshallah that's one more okay. Yeah, I think we mentioned it earlier before you came. The ulama have two views. One of them says don't use it because of the high amount of alcohol, so you get the alcohol-free one. And the second group said that it's allowed because you're using it for external use and you're spitting it out, not consuming it. So get the alcohol-free one. That's true. It's available, and this is the best. Inshallah, we'll end with this much. Subhanakallahumma bihamdika ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk.